How's it going, friends? I hope that I'm catching you before you are putting any offers in, before you're looking at any homes, and naturally, I hope that you intend to work with us when that time does come. But today's video, we're talking what are the things that you need to be keeping an eye out for when you are first looking at homes before you put an offer in, so you don't go waste your money on an inspection, or even worse, so you can feel educated about what to be looking out for in homes before you're putting offers. So ultimately, so you don't spend money on an inspection that you probably should have just known, hey, this house isn't in that good of shape. Sound good? All right, hit it. How's it going, friends? My name is Jesse Lynch, and I work with a real estate team called Welcome to Denver. You can check out our website, welcometodenver.co. And this YouTube channel, it's all about helping you find a place to call home, helping you find a place to land in Denver, in Colorado, in the greater Denver, Boulder, Fort Collins, Colorado Springs. So again, relocations and first-time home buyers, that's what we do, that's what we focus on, and that's what we do better than anybody else. So if either of those things sound appealing to you, then do me a favor, do yourself a favor, subscribe to this channel and click the bell so you can get notified when we put these videos out. And if you wouldn't mind, give this video a thumbs up, say something nice, friendly, funny, whatever in the comments, and would appreciate it so much. That's very helpful, not just to this channel and the real estate team, but to people like yourselves who are looking for this kind of information. And I say this every video, but I truly mean it. If you are moving to Denver or you already live in Denver, then reach out to us and we will crush it for you. Nobody will work harder for you than we will. You can go to our website, welcometodenver.co. We have a contact form there that you can fill out in like 30 seconds or less, or you can shoot us an email directly to info@welcometodenver.co. They lead to the same inbox and then we'll get you going. So however you want to do it, we would love it if you did. But with no further ado, let's dive into this video. Let's talk through the things that you need to know before you're making an offer on a house, the things to look out for during the showing, condition issues with the house, and really just building materials, all that stuff. Let's go right now. All right. Feel free to get a notepad out, take notes, type notes on your phone or whatever. But I'm also in the description, I'm gonna put a link to just like a PDF of here are the things that we're talking about, the things that you should be looking out for, and really like the most important items as we see it. So let's just dive in. And first of all, there are certain things that are opinion-based or sort of intangibles that you can't necessarily know for sure, right? And certainly if you hire an inspector, they're not gonna tell you things like, it had a bad vibe, right? Or they're not going to tell you like, hey, the layout in this house is really bad. It's not an efficient place to live. That's stuff for you to decide. And of course, they're not going to say like, this house is ugly and we think you have bad taste, right? So all of that stuff, that is very sort of opinion-based. That's for you to decide. And we as realtors don't want to really sort of force our opinions on you either. So we might say that the layout, it's not quite as efficient as maybe another house that you looked at. But ultimately, it's up for you. We don't know what layout is efficient for you, right? Some people want an open concept. They want a living room and a kitchen that are connected with the dining room, in between. Some people don't want that at all. They're like, no, I want my little haven where I can cook meals and then I can go out to the rest of my house. So it's a real thing that people have different opinions. So we're not really talking anything opinion-based. We're trying to get as sort of to the core of what items are the biggest deal, right? What items suck to deal with the most so that you aren't taking possession of some house that has these things. And more importantly, you're not hearing it from the inspector first about some of these things. So we're gonna start from the outside in. We're gonna pretend like you just pulled up to the house. You're in the driveway or you're in the front yard or something. You're looking up at the house. And what are you looking for from the front yard looking at the house? First things first, the roofing. The roofing is a very important piece of the home. And a big part of that is just because it's expensive. Roofs have, or roofs, do you say roof? I don't know. Roofs have like many different sort of lifespans, right, depending on the material. And some are really, really good and last a very, very long time, like a steel or sort of like a tin siding. And certain areas, those are not that common. And I would say most areas, that roof is not that common. Another lesser common, but depending on the area, potentially more common, is like a tile roof, right? And a tile roof can last a good amount of time, but it can also have some like smaller defects and a little more maintenance involved. You know, like a tile should last a really long time. It's basically like a stone, right? Or like a porcelain or something like that. It should last a long time, but it can also be prone to damage and small maintenance that's necessary. Then another very, very common roof type is like a shingle, right? And not all shingles are created equally. There's fundamentally, I'm sure if you like work for like 3M or something, you're like, hey, dude, there's way more than that. But from a very broad sort of concept of the roof, the most common two that we see are like an architectural shingle and a 3-tab shingle. A 3-tab shingle is what I understand to be an older technology. It doesn't last quite as long. It might be a little bit cheaper. Some people are still putting those on houses, which seems foolish, but probably because they're cheaper to some degree. An architectural shingle is a much more modern technology in the shingle game. And as far as I'm concerned, you can tell the difference because a 3-tab shingle is fairly flat. It lays pretty flat. There's like little ridges. It'll be like shingle, small little indentation, shingle, small little indentation, right? And then shingle. Whereas an architectural shingle roof is more like, here's the bottom shingle, the next one goes right above it, the next one goes right above it, the next one goes right above it. So I think the beauty of that is, and again, I don't totally know, I'm not a roofer, but this is my understanding of it. The beauty of an architectural shingle roof and the beauty of some of these other types of roof is that water is only ever going down. Right? A 3-tab, it's like it has to go down, but then it has to go up on that lip a little bit. And that might be why they don't last as long, but nonetheless, that's how you can tell that it's architectural shingles rather than 3-tab. And so like an architectural shingle is maybe going to last 20, 25 years, something like that, whereas a 3-tab might last 15, 20, right? So you have maybe 5 to 10 more years on an architectural shingle. Whereas like a steel roof could last 50 years, maybe even 100. Depending on the area. And even within the shingle roof situation, one thing that I'm going to probably be on the lookout for, and you should too, is are there multiple layers of shingles, right? Did somebody lay over an architectural shingle on top of a 3-tab? I think technically that is to code. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that's fairly common to do. And you might hire a roofer who says, we can do that, it's going to be cheaper, way less labor, and they're not really disposing of as many shingles. So just a lot easier of a process. But that's pretty much always going to sacrifice the lifespan of the shingle, because basically what happens is it's going to retain more heat, and heat is harmful to shingles. You know, long exposure of heat, which you know that shingles get a ton of heat, that's going to slowly wear down on that technology. Okay, and in general with roofs, I'm looking for what are the materials and how do I feel about those materials. Do I have an idea of what the age is? And if I don't have an idea of what the age is, I want to look at condition. Even if I do have an idea of what the age is, I still want to look at condition. Somebody could have put on a roof, a non-permitted roof, 5 years ago, and they could say, yeah, this roof's 5 years old. And you're like, well, that's great. I don't have to worry about the roof. But if they did a bad job, if it's in bad condition, if there was a crazy, storm of some sort that's ripping the shingles up, well, then cool. It doesn't matter if it's 5 years old if it's in bad condition. So materials, age, condition of the roof. And those three things, by the way, materials, age, condition, are things we're looking for on pretty much all of these things. So what is next? I would say the big one on the outside is siding. What is the house shrouded in, right? There are so many different potential materials that it could be. Working backward, so you have kind of the classics, right? You have a brick, you have a stucco, and you have a wood siding. Those are all going to have different lifespans. Brick obviously is known to last pretty long, but repairing brick, kind of a pain in the butt. Wood, is not going to last as long as brick, but repairing the wood is going to be easier than repairing brick. And stucco, I actually really love stucco. It's going to be maybe somewhere in the middle. It might not last as long as brick. It's going to be harder than wood siding to repair, and there's usually fewer contractors that do stucco, so keep that in mind. Usually they can charge a premium because there's not as many people who do it. But as far as I'm concerned, if you have like a more old classic home with one of those, then we're really focused on condition, right? I love the character of those older materials, and if it's in good shape, I'm about it. I'm a fan. So really with that, we're looking at the materials, we're looking at the condition. And then there's gonna be newer things, right? Like after that, sometime came like a steel siding, right? After that, sometime came a couple different types of siding, one of which is asbestos. And asbestos siding is something that you should look out for. Asbestos is considered like an environmental danger, which is that if you have asbestos siding and you were to crack it and breathe it in, it's bad for your lungs. How I understand it is fundamentally the fibers that asbestos is made out of. They make a very strong product, but that's because the fibers are sort of corkscrew shaped. And while that's cool for how long they can last, it's not cool when they become airborne, you breathe them in, and those fibers dig into your lungs, right? That's how mesothelioma and probably all those commercials that you've seen, that's sort of like what that is all in reference to. And prolonged exposure to that kind of thing, not good. That said, the general consensus is that if they're on the side of the house, like if they're just there and they're not being disturbed, it's not really a danger to your health. But if you were to start demoing it, right, taking like a hammer to it or something, and it were to become airborne and you were to be breathing that in, then that prolonged exposure could be bad for you. But if you have no intention on doing things yourself, it's still a problem because naturally the people doing it, that's going to be a problem. And then sometime around the same time, steel siding came out. And steel siding, if it's in good condition, could continue to last a very long time. But when it gets to be a problem is when it's in bad condition and now you're trying to put on, match new siding to what is a very old siding and very old technology at this point. Same goes for vinyl siding. Vinyl siding is still being used today, so it's not as crazy. It's not as difficult to source. But vinyl siding is not intended to be painted. Vinyl siding is considered like a maintenance-free siding, which is all good until you get a hole in it from something, a lawnmower, something like that. And now you maybe have 20, 30-year-old vinyl siding on the side of your house, and you're trying to match newer siding to that. That becomes very difficult. Even if you can manage to get the same exact product, the bummer of it is that very often the sun has faded the color on the house, and so now the two, the exact same product doesn't match. Sometimes you'll even see they have different batches. I've had people put new siding on a home that everything's brand new, but you put it up on the house and it looks like two different sidings because they came from like a different grouping of that siding. So super not ideal, something you want to avoid. But vinyl siding in general is great siding. It's, and it's well regarded as being a low maintenance kind of siding, right? And then you get into what I think are kind of like newer, more modern, more desirable. I like the classics or the really new technology. Those like middle ones, not as big of a fan of, but that's just like a personal opinion. Would I buy a house with metal siding? Absolutely. Would I buy a house with vinyl siding? Absolutely, as long as everything else made sense. But I think like the newer sort of creme de la creme, right, is there's basically two products and people will argue about which one is better. Contractors will say, no, this one's better and here's why it's better. And, homeowners will say, I have this, but I wish I had that, whatever. And fundamentally, those two are LP Smart Side and James Hardie siding. The James Hardie siding is like a fiber cement. So it's extremely resistant to water. It's extremely resistant to bugs. The LP Smart Side is a manufactured wood product. And because it's so, manufactured, it's also extremely resistant to rot and water and bugs and all that stuff. So it might just come down to stylistically what you prefer, but in general, if you're looking at a house that's new enough to have those things, they're probably in pretty good shape. And in my opinion, they're pretty nice sidings to have. They will probably last you a long time into the future. And if you have a house from the 40s, 50s, 60s and it has one of those on it, I'm probably going to be pretty thrilled myself. Okay, so you're done looking at the siding and the roof. Now I want you to look down at the ground. We're talking the concrete or the blacktop or the gravel, like whatever the driveway is made out of, the sidewalks, all of that stuff. I want you to pay attention to that. Is it in good shape? Does it look like it was DIY'd? I probably would be pretty skeptical of a full concrete driveway that I could tell was like a homeowner special, right? Concrete is a complicated thing. I have friends who do it, and I would not do it. I'm pretty handy, and I don't think that I would try to pull it off. That said, there are plenty of people out there who are like, hey, you could do it, and you would do it well. But I've tried little bits of it, and I'm not even close to as good as what the pros do. So in general, I'm going to be hesitant for homeowner special concrete. But then I'm just looking at, again, the materials and the condition. Is it concrete? Is it good? Is it cracked dramatically? Is the San Andreas fault, like going right through the concrete? Or is it okay? If it's blacktop, I'm looking at, is it smooth blacktop? Is it really bumpy blacktop? Or is it somewhere in between? Think about like going rollerblading, so specific, or skateboarding, and then you're on the sidewalk, it's all good, you're clicking down the sidewalk panels, and then you're coming up on like this driveway that is super, super bumpy, and you're like, well, I'm about to wipe out. That probably means that the rocks underneath the blacktop are in place, and that's good. But the top layer of the blacktop is eroded away. It's fundamentally gone. At which point, that's really going to start losing its hold, and it's not going to last very long at that point. And then naturally, gravel. Is it a gravel driveway? Okay, cool. Are there deep, deep ruts in it, or is it relatively flat? How does all that look? Also, does it sort of have like a lipstick on a pig kind of a fix where it looks like they just put brand new rocks down? I would probably walk on that and see, like, are there really soft spots? If there's really soft spots, that means they just laid rock over the top, and 20 drives of a vehicle over that are going to displace that. You're going to have big old ruts again. And then the last two, when we're on the outside, are fundamentally working toward the same thing, which is getting water away from the house. And that's grading and gutters. Gutters are very, very important, and they go a really long way in protecting the foundation of your house. But if you don't have gutters, again, wouldn't be a deal breaker. I would definitely buy something that didn't have gutters, but I'd be paying attention to the grading of the yard quite a lot. And grading fundamentally is, if this is the side of the house, then how does the land, how does the earth, how does the ground move away? Is it at a slant downward away from the house, or does it slope upward? At which point, if rainfall is there, then it's going to go back toward the house. And that's something that we want to avoid. We don't want water hanging out by the foundation of the house. It's going to do damage. Undeniably, water is not a friend to the home. And then when it comes to gutters, they're not all created equally. So I'm looking at condition. Are they visually crappy, or are they pretty good? Do they have downspouts? And then do they have downspout extensions? Downspout extensions, if they don't have it, it's not necessarily the end of the world. Plenty of homes don't have them, and it's pretty easy to put on it. But if they don't have them, there's a chance that the listing agent or the sellers decided to take them off because they thought the house would show better without them. If you're a nerd like me and you're like, well, I want to see those, I want to know that you've had them in place and that, the foundation has been cared for and looked after. But if they took them off or just haven't had them, at the end of the day, I'm just going to be paying attention to any kind of things that I can see in the foundation. Are there damages going on there at all? So now we're going to go from the front yard, we're going to walk in the front door, and then what are we checking out in there? Naturally, you're going to be checking out the cosmetics, the paint colors, the floor colors, what shape are the floors in. You're going to be looking at cabinets and all that stuff, the appliances. Of course, you're going to be looking at that stuff. But again, we're kind of going a little bit deeper to the things that most people aren't really looking at, paying attention to when they're first looking at a home. And to me, the big one on the inside is windows. Windows are so important on a home for livability, right? Even just the ability to open a window easily just makes life easy. But even more than that, windows just are very expensive to replace, okay? I've been quoted many different things for windows over the years, but a general, if I'm just calculating really rough numbers and I'm just paying a window contractor to put in replacement windows, a ballpark number is like $1,000 a window, okay? And you can do it cheaper on your own, totally understand. If you have a handyman or something like that, they can do it cheaper, totally understand. But if you're just paying a window company to do it, it could be $1,000 a window, right? So then you're like, well, how many windows? Oh, $20,000 for... Okay, yeah, that adds up pretty quickly. And again, I'm looking at the materials. Are they wood windows? Are they original windows? Like, are they really old? If they are, do they operate? There are some old, like Craftsman style wooden windows that don't operate at all. Like, you literally can't lift them. And there are some that have been cared for extremely well that still operate beautifully. And those are just two totally different things. Again, I wouldn't run from a house that had wood windows. I would run from a house probably, unless the price was right, but that had bad wood windows. I would have to know, like, I'm replacing all these windows, right? If none of these work, I'm replacing all of these. But if it had wood windows that still operate, I'm probably interested, especially if it has a storm window on the outside. Then that's not a bad situation, and I personally like the character that those windows bring. And then we move into like newer windows, and you have like aluminum windows. Personally, not a fan of aluminum windows. I just don't see them hold up that well. They also seem loud and feel very cheap. But if they operate wonderfully, okay, then they probably have been maintained very well. At which point, good. Now we know at least the windows work. And then you move into even newer products than that. You have some that are just metal windows. Some metal windows are awesome. You have single pane and dual pane windows. And I'm looking for the dual pane in general or a single pane with a storm window. And the reason for that is the two panes of glass on a window. If you look at a newer window, you'll see that there's an interior pane and an exterior pane. And what is going on there is in the middle of those, there's a gas inside of there that acts as an insulator. So air hits the window or approaches the window and it doesn't pass through the glass or pass through the gas, right? So that's very difficult to say. But I don't know, I think maybe the gas is more dense or something like that. Not a scientist, don't understand it. But I do know that they work really, really well. So the dual pane window, really great. A triple pane window, even better. That's going to be pretty rock solid for a long time to come. And then in the newer windows, I'm looking for dual pane, and then beyond looking for dual pane, what I'm probably looking for is, are the dual pane intact, right? Are there cracks? A crack, fundamentally, the gas is gone, right? So you don't want cracked dual pane windows. And then also I'd be looking for like a fog in a dual pane window. And what that fog is telling me is that sort of seal on that is broken. I might not be able to see a crack, but there's some way water and moisture is getting in there and it's causing a fog, which ultimately means that window isn't operating, which ultimately means that window doesn't have the insulation factor that it should. And so in general, be looking out for your windows, be looking out for the insulation that it provides, and do you have to replace it, or do you have to replace a few, and then factor that in to the price. Now, from windows, I'm going to look at the floors, right? And in general, most floors might be fine or salvageable, like a hardwood floor. A lot of the time, that's a salvageable floor, even if it looks really bad. I've done that a few times with great success. But what I'm really looking for is any kind of slope, right? Are there massive slopes? Like, very often what you'll see is a house that slopes all the way to the middle of the house, which means fundamentally some piers that were in the middle of the house have sunk more than the exterior foundation of the house. That's not ideal. That is not something I probably really want to deal with. It might be solvable, but there's a dollar amount there, and I'm going to be paying close attention to what the inspector says, and I'm really going to probably even be approaching the seller about, like, hey, can we have this looked at by a structural engineer or by a foundation, shoring up kind of company. And just like you'll see it slanting to the inside, you'll see the opposite where it's slanting to the outside. The slanted floors wouldn't necessarily be a deal breaker, but they are a canary in the coal mine. They are pointing out, they're basically announcing that there's potentially some other issue afoot, no pun intended. And now inside, I'm also going to be looking at the finish work, right? I like to call those canaries in the coal mine as well, where you'll see some real DIY finish work. And sometimes you'll see flip homes that look like they were, a shop class project or something where they just aren't very good, right? No offense to people in shop class who are good at it, but there's, some pretty shoddy workmanship out there. And to me, again, I'm saying, all right, if they did this by themselves, what other stuff did they do by themselves, and what other stuff did they do poorly? And then beyond that, I'm looking at the mechanicals. Mechanicals are a huge part of the comfort level in a house. So things like furnace, naturally, if you're in an area that needs a furnace, that's a huge factor. And how long those last depends on the style quite a bit. It also depends on location as far as like how warm, how cold it gets. So I'm looking at the furnace, and I'm basically going to try to make some inferences based on the age and the condition. Sometimes you don't always know the age, but you can kind of look at it like a vehicle. I like to say you can look at it in the same way that I could look at like a 2004 Kia Rio. I was gonna say Optima, but I don't even know if they existed. And be like, that's probably like 2005, give or take, because of the style of the product. Similar sort of things happen in the furnace world. Just stylistically, they look a certain way. High efficiency furnaces, it doesn't make sense, but they don't last as long. They might be cheaper to run, but they don't last as long for whatever reason. So does that really high efficiency? I don't know. But they have normal standard efficiency furnaces. Those will last maybe potentially 10 years longer on average than a high efficiency. So I'm looking for that, and then I'm looking for age and all that. And then I'm also doing the same thing when it comes to air conditioners, right? Air conditioners are a huge contributor to the comfort one might have in their home. And I'm looking at those age and condition as well. The older ones are like round, right? If I see a round AC where it's like spherical, I'm pretty much saying like that's past its lifespan. That's living on borrowed time, right? And again, I still might buy a house that has that, but I'm like, well, I'm going to put that in the old noodle as something I have to replace relatively soon. But then there are smaller square ones or box-shaped ones. Those are a little bit older. And then the larger, kind of more bulky sort of square ones, cube ones, tend to be newer. A lot of that just has to do with what chemical they use to cool. They used to be able to be smaller because the chemical was more efficient, but very bad for the environment. So now they got bigger and less efficient in terms of the cooling. So yeah, there's that. But I want those to be relatively new. A new furnace, a new AC, those cost a good bit of money. There's also a water heater. Some people call it a hot water heater, which I think is funny, very redundant. I don't know, that'd be like a cold air freezer or something like that. But a water heater is somewhere around like $2,000. So not necessarily going to be the end of the world for me, but it's something I'm going to want to pay attention to. Again, a furnace, AC, water heater combo, if you had to buy all three of those right after you took possession, that's a good solid chunk of change that you don't necessarily want to deal with right after you buy a house. And that's fundamentally the biggest items, the most expensive items in a home. But if you're here this long, thank you for being here. And there's some special things that I want to point out that you can't necessarily see. This is the benefit of an inspector, and this is why you ought to be careful when it comes to making sure that you're inspecting all of these things, these unknown, these unseeable objects. So it's sort of a bonus if you've stayed this long, here you go. In some places of the country, of the world, there's a gas known as radon gas, which is fundamentally a low-lying gas that comes through the foundation of homes. Modern homes almost always have like a passive radon mitigation system, but older homes don't necessarily. So a radon test is fairly easy to get done. And even more than that, it's actually fairly easy to mitigate a house that has high levels of radon. Typically, it's in like the $1,500 to $2,000 if it comes back high. That said, it's often something people want to get done in part of an inspection if possible. And usually that's going to cost somewhere around $200 just for somebody to come in, put in a little tester for a certain amount of time, and come back and collect it. And then another thing that you could really look at a house for quite a long time and you would never know if you didn't have the right tools is how is the insulation in the home? Specifically, does the attic have a good amount of insulation? And do the walls have proper insulation? Are you losing cold air in the summer and warm air in the winter out through the walls, or out through the attic? And is the home insulated properly to make your home as efficient as possible? And then lastly, and I think probably most importantly, is basically a sewer scope, a sewer line inspection. Pretty much what happens is the inspector or a plumber will come in with a camera on a line, and they will shove that line down the sewer, and hopefully they can make it all the way to the city sewer main. But very often what happens is in the sewer line, tree roots will work their way into the cracks of the sewer line. If it has cracks, if it's made of clay or galvanized or some combination of those things. Very often more modern homes have like a PVC, which is typically in much better shape. But if at some point, if something were to like put too much force down on the earth and were to crush that, or were to collapse the sewer lines, that could be a huge nightmare. Basically what it would mean would be a plumbing backup into your house. Gross. And also, again, those tree roots will come into those cracks, and potentially a tree root could grow so big inside the sewer line that it could block it fully. And as a homeowner, you want to know that that's going on. You don't want a backup the day you take possession of the home. So if you can get it sewer scope done, then the likelihood of you sort of avoiding that sizable headache, it improves pretty dramatically. So I think those are the three big ones where it's like, look, you could really be on top of your game looking at these houses, but if you don't ever do those, if you don't get those things inspected, they could still come up. But I really do hope that having this and the list that I'm going to have down in the description, having an idea of what are we looking out for, what's the most expensive stuff to repair in a home, I hope that that gives you some peace of mind, that makes you feel maybe a little bit more confident down the road when the time comes. Of course, when you reach out to us and we get to help you with that purchase. Again, website, email address, all that down in the description. Appreciate you all watching this. Have a good one. I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.